So good morning. I'm Catherine Wall. I work in Disability and Access Services on the Accessibility and Usability team. We're here with our team, Kathy Cahill, who's the Associate Dean of Accessibility and Usability, Kate Quinn, who does Assistive Technology, Jen D, who does Assistive Technology, Chris LaRoche, who does User Experience, and Rich Calogero is not with us today. He also does accessibility. We're also joined by Pauline Dowell from HR, who has done a considerable amount of work on making PDF forms accessible. So we wanted to draw on her expertise and experience today working with a lot of forms. So thank you, Pauline, for joining us today. This is a monthly series that we are putting on. Let's see. Advancing the slides is also tricky. There we go. So this is a monthly series that we're doing called Accessibility Office Hours. We take up a different topic every month. This month it's PDF forms. We have a list up on our website, on the DAS website, of topics coming up. In September, Chris will be presenting on user experience, and I think that's going to be really popular. As always, if you have any questions about accessibility, please email us at accessibility@mit.edu because we really do want to hear your questions and we're happy to help. So today we're going to talk about PDF forms. I just want to go through the different items we're going to be talking about. First of all, we're going to talk about PDF forms and why we use them. Then we're going to talk about the software that you need to convert your forms to PDF and to make them accessible. We're going to talk about accessibility best practices. Our group never does a presentation where we don't talk about best practices and what you need to do to meet those best practices. And then we're going to do a demonstration where we're going to take a simple Word form and convert it to PDF and then review the changes in there and make it accessible. As we go through the demonstration, we'd really love to hear your questions, so please ask. Chris is going to be handling questions. Since we're such a small group, you really can just shout out the questions. You don't need to put them in the chat or wait. So please ask when you have questions. So PDF forms, why? PDF forms are replacing paper forms and Word forms all over campus right now. Part of that is because we went digital in March due to COVID, and we find that a lot of groups had forms that they were using. Maybe they put a paper form on their website, like a Word form. They put it up, people printed it out, filled it in, and maybe sent it through interoffice mail. We can't really do that anymore. It's very difficult to fill out a Word form digitally. It often messes up the formatting. Sometimes things it just can't be done well. It needs to be completed by hand. And those kinds of forms are not accessible. HTML forms are a good option sometimes. They can be made accessible by using HTML elements. But there are times when HTML forms just don't work. Rich Calogero and our team pointed out earlier this week that, when you fill out an HTML form, you often don't have a copy of that available to you. With a PDF form, you have a nice self-contained form with all of the information that you put in. You can keep a copy. You can send someone else a copy. You can submit it easily electronically. There are some provisions for digital signatures on there. So PDF forms are a nice option. It's easily readable. Everybody has access to the free Adobe Reader, so you can get the form that way. What we're going to talk about today are PDF forms that start out as in Word. You can create a form from scratch in Adobe Acrobat. And Pauline, I don't know what you think about that idea, but I think that would be really, really challenging.
It is very restrictive in what it can do. I mean, it's come a long way, but it's still not as easy to the finer finessing in Acrobat as opposed to Word.
Yeah, and in Word, you can kind of draft out your form, you can make changes to it easily, you could, circulate it for review, and then you could do your fine tuning in Acrobat. A couple things to point out is that you will need Adobe Acrobat Professional to do this work. MIT staff can download that from the IS&T software grid. I believe it's Creative Cloud now, so it's Adobe Acrobat DC. You cannot do this work with the free Adobe Reader. So best practices. We are consistently talking about best practices in accessibility. And these are always the same. You want to make sure that your form, no matter what format it is in, has good color contrast so that people with vision disabilities can see the content. If they need to make it bigger, that it still shows up. If they flip the contrast, they can still see it. If they need to see it in grayscale, they can still see the information. If you have images in your form, you want to make sure that those are labeled properly so that someone who is using software like a screen reader can find out what's in those images or can skip them entirely. You also want to make sure you're using descriptive language. You want to make sure that the language is clear on the form so that people know what questions you're asking. You don't want any ambiguity or confusion. You want to make sure that you're using an easy to read font. Scripting fonts are very difficult to read for people who have vision disabilities and might be enlarging the text. They're very difficult to read for people who have reading disabilities and need to see the differentiation between the letters. So we really recommend sans serif fonts like Arial and Helvetica, and a nice font size like 11 or 12 point. You want to make sure that your form is laid out logically, that you have your information chunked appropriately so that someone can easily go through your form and know what questions you're asking. And you want to make sure that you're using good structure and that it's a programmatic structure, because that's what makes the form easily read with assistive technology like a screen reader that needs to pull out things like headings or lists or tables. And this is really what gets difficult when you're using Adobe, is putting in that structure and making sure that that structure is present. So let's talk about Word. The more you can get done in the Word document, the less work you're going to have to do in Adobe Acrobat. So we recommend really doing a lot of work up front in Word and then moving to Acrobat for your form. There are form controls available in Word, but we don't recommend using them at this time. If you have the developer tools available in your ribbon at the top of Word, they do allow for some form controls, text fields, radio buttons, checkboxes. But we've talked about this, we've looked at it, and we don't feel like it works particularly well. And so you're better off not using those developer controls right now for forms that you're converting to PDF. And you want to follow the basics. You want to make sure that you're using clear language, an easy to read font, good color contrast, include alt text, and make sure that you're using headings, lists, and tables from the Word styles to make in your document, because those are going to hopefully convert to PDF and make it easier for someone to read using assistive technology. So I want to escape out of this presentation right now and go to the Word document, because I think it's easier to look at the Word document first, and then we could talk about what we need to do in PDF. So let me see if I can. Okay, so now I'm going to share this Word document. Okay, are you all able to see this Word document? It says test form for PDF conversion.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a sample form that I put together that has a lot of different types of form fields that are common in forms that we see. So it has text fields for things like name and email, and even a multi-line text field for a description. And then we have a couple of different question types here, like indicate your type of employment. This would be a radio button because you can only choose one option, full-time, part-time, or contract employee. This next question where it says choose your favorite colors, please check all that apply, would be a checkbox because you can check many different things. And then we have a table that says, you know, list the IT related courses you've taken this year. And there are 3 columns: course name, school, and MIT sponsored, yes or no. If we keep going, we see that we also have a signature field and a date. And there are a couple of links in here to a website and an email address. So it has a lot of different elements that are common in forms. A couple of things that I want to point out. We don't really have any color contrast issues here because this form is done in black and white. This logo at the top where it says Division of Student Life is an image. So we're going to have to make sure that that has alt text on it. These lines that you see at the top and the bottom are also typically images. And we want to make sure that those have null text on them so that a screen reader would skip them. As we look at the form fields, when we talk about clear language, a couple of things I wanted to point out. The form says, you know, name, department, email, MIT ID, job title, phone, supervisor, phone. Visually, when I look at this, it makes sense to me. Name, I'm assuming, is me as the employee, and phone number, I would assume, is probably my phone number. And then visually, I see supervisor and phone next to that. So I would probably assume if I were looking at this form that that second phone number went with supervisor. If I was having this form read to me, I have 2 fields that have the exact same label, phone and phone. And that could be really confusing. So I think this is a place where we would want to make a change, and maybe we would call this work phone and we would call this supervisor phone, to just make a distinction between these 2 fields. Just check my instructions here. And one of the things that we do at this point is you'd want to use your tools available in Word. So if you go to the tools menu, there's a check accessibility option. And if you run that, because I've already done this a couple times, it doesn't find any issues, which is great. But it might pick up that your images don't have alt text. It might pick up an issue with the tables. And it would allow you to fix those here. So we'd want to fix those and save those. Pauline, did you have anything you wanted to say at this point about the work you do in Word?
Yeah, a lot of the forms that I'm making accessible are from other people who are not as really good in Word as they think they are. They'll make it look really good, but instead of using line spacing, they use returns or soft returns to add space between lines. And that causes problems for the screen reader. It reads those as an item. So I usually go through and strip out all of those weird spaces and use the, paragraph spacing to get rid of all of them. And also you were talking as I came into the meeting today about underscore across to create a line as opposed to a tab line. I find better success with a tab line because often the screen reader will read underscore, 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 underscore instead of a line. So the simpler you can make it, the better.
Pauline, that's a really good point about the lines, and what Pauline is talking about are these lines that appear next to the name field. You need those there so that Acrobat can identify a form field, but it will read out if it's not done properly as underscore, underscore, underscore in the Adobe Acrobat field. And that can be really problematic. And so we were talking about the best ways to do that. And one that we found is tab underline, where you set your sort of tab stops and you use your underline there. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to PDFs?
Catherine, I just have a question about when you said fonts.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have particular fonts you suggest, or just anything that's not like that's a sans serif, or is there any recommendations in that regard just to make it easy?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think Arial and Helvetica are very common, but any sans serif font that's a decent size is going to be good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just
I have one.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So this pretty much is, except for ours, human resources instead of division of student life. Our logo in the header, because it's trapped in the header, the screen reader will still see it when it becomes a PDF form. And in Word is when I make it give it the alt text of logo. The underline I make as decorative instead of trying to create a picture of it. So, but sometimes it's, Word still gets hung up there. The accessibility check in Word still gets hung up on how that's displayed. I can't figure out how to get around that one. I just leave it as decorative.
Yeah, and that's typically what we tell people to do, is leave it as decorative. And then hopefully, I have had a lot of trouble with the alt text carrying over to Adobe PDF.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't know if that's because I'm working on a Mac, and that conversion is a little wonky, but sometimes I find it loses that. It often loses that, and I have to do it again in Adobe.
Okay.
It's easy enough to correct in Adobe, but it's frustrating if you feel like you already did that work.
And a lot of the other thing that I noticed that you do, and I'm very curious about this, when you go down and you put in your radial buttons, you do not put any kind of a placeholder in your Word doc. You just leave it as an empty space, or put it after the item. Like when you're checking off your choices for radial buttons, do you leave a space before and no placeholder? And the check boxes, there's a wingding checkbox. I mean, it's just a little square that people put there, and that's when I know when I'm converting them to fillable and accessible to put one there. But it looks nicer without them preloaded in there.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. I didn't put them in there because I didn't want to have to take them out of the PDF document, and I was creating this document, so I knew what it was. Right. It probably is helpful to have that. I might strip it out before I go to Adobe. Okay. And you make a good point that a placeholder could be really helpful. So even just a tab stop without the underline. But because otherwise you're going to have to move it in Adobe when you put the radio button or the checkbox in.
Got it.
Yeah, Pauline and I have had long discussions about the checkboxes and the radio buttons in Adobe. And there are a lot of reasons that we really like using them. And one of them is because they are nice and big and easy to see. So you don't, by default, they are big and easily visible. And you don't have to do anything to make them accessible. They just
work.
Yeah, they just work. You have to go to considerable effort to make them smaller and harder to see, which most people don't want to do, which is great. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here, where we're going to talk quickly about PDFs. And let me... Zoom really does not like PowerPoint. And I think what I'm going to do is just share the PowerPoint this way because I think it's easier. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about the PDF form. This is the most difficult and tedious part of the process. I think the instructions that I have something like 2 pages of detailed steps, 1 through 14, in terms of making the PDF accessible. You're gonna want to save often during this process. Many of the actions that you'll take in Adobe Acrobat cannot be undone. It's very frustrating to do a lot of work on the form and then lose it and have to start all over again. So please save often. Make sure, again, that you have Adobe Acrobat DC or Pro. And you're going to need some tools that are available through Acrobat. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll share my screen and I'll show you where these tools are. But you'll need the accessibility tools and the prepare forms tools. Those 2 things are both pretty important, and we're going to be using them a lot. And you can follow along if you want with the detailed instructions that I posted in the chat, if that's helpful. So, and just to reiterate, in the last slide here is a couple of things. Web AIM, Web Accessibility in Mind from Utah State University, has a lot of good information about making Acrobat forms and documents accessible on their site. They keep it up. It's very hard to keep up with this, I find, because they're constantly changing Acrobat and things change and the way that you do things changes. So we also have information available on our website about PDF forms and documents. So now I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to go to Adobe Acrobat. And Pauline, you work primarily on a PC, correct? Okay, so here we are. I'm working on a Mac. Everybody should be able to see this is the form that we brought over. It's very similar to what we saved in Word. So you have to save it as a PDF in Word, and then you open the PDF in Acrobat. This is the tools menu that I was talking about. There are a lot of different tools here. But what we're going to be concerned about is prepare form and accessibility, which I think is down at the bottom. Yes, accessibility. I have both of these added to my tools panel, which is here on the right, but those are the 2 things that you're going to need. So the first thing that I do is go to prepare forms. And you can see you have some choices here: single file, scanner, or new. We want single file. It's showing my document. There's a checkbox that says this document requires signatures. I'm going to leave that unchecked because that opens up a world of signature options and other tools that I think we don't want to discuss today. And so you hit start. And what that's going to do is go through and identify form fields in your document. So you can see that on the screen, the different form fields that were just a blank line now have this purple shading, and they have a name in the middle. They have a label in the middle. So next to name, there's a blue box that says name in the middle, email. So this is really nice because it's identified all the form fields in my document, or most of them. You can see it didn't pick up the radio buttons or the check boxes, but that's okay. We can add those later. It did pick up the table, course rows. It should have picked up all of these. I'm not sure why it didn't. It did earlier. And it's got the signature field and the date. So it did a pretty good job identifying a lot of our fields. And what you want to make sure is you want to make sure that every field has a name and a tooltip. So you can see that this field, I'm going to click control click or right click on a PC, and you can go to the properties menu, which I think you cannot see. Can you see the properties menu? Okay, great. And this will tell you what the name and the tooltip are for every field. Okay, so the field name is name and the tooltip is name. The tooltip is really important because that is what is going to be read out to a screen reader user. Okay, so you do not want the tooltip to be blank. And it also is helpful for sighted users because when they hover over a field, name will pop up. So it's useful to all users, but it's really crucial for screen reader users that that be there. You have some other choices. You can see you can have fields validated and you can choose different formats. But these are the things that we're really concerned about are the name and the tooltip. Let's see. I mentioned, so a couple things I wanted to show you. You can see that here I'd made some changes in the form. This still says work phone and telephone. It would be better if the second one said supervisor telephone, like we had identified. You can see this is a paragraph that we wanted people to fill in. The question is, please provide a detailed description of your request. And there are about 6 lines here. You can see that what Adobe did is identified each line as a separate field. So it says, please provide a detailed description of your request 1, and then it goes through 6. That's not going to be really helpful for a user. We want them to see this all as one multi-line field. So what I do is I go through and I just delete these. I delete 2 through 6. And then you're able to grab the handles on this field and drag it down to encompass the entire paragraph. And then I control click and go to the properties field where I can rename this. And I just want it to be, please provide a detailed description of your request. I take away the 1. And that way it's just going to read a little bit cleaner. I also want to go to the options and I want to say that this is a multi-line field. Okay, and I close that. And that works pretty well.
Can I?
Now, oh, go ahead.
One thing that I found happens quite a bit, and is a legit problem that you might find. Sometimes when you want to pop out, you hit the preview button to see what it's going to look like or try how your screen reader is going to read it. When you hit that preview button, your whole form might disappear and all you're left with are the blue fillable boxes. That is a glitch in the Adobe system. And there are workarounds for it, but they're a little bit complicated. You have to save it as an FDF, the data, and then try to pop it back into an older version of it. It's complicated. So the best thing to do is save looking at the preview until the very end, until you've saved it. So if you can avoid looking at hitting that preview button, you'll wind up with less problems.
Pauline, that's a really good point. I almost never use that for that reason. And what I do is I save often, and I might even jump out of the form I might save it, close it, yep, open it, and look at it if I really want to see something.
That's the correct way to do it. Yeah. You won't have problems.
Okay. Thank you. That's a really, yeah. So, yeah, this is the preview and close buttons up here. Yeah. We want to stay away from preview. And close, I believe close refers not to the form, but to prepare forms, the tool. It closes the tool, not the file. Okay, so now we're going to get to the really complicated things, and these are our radio buttons. And so this is where you need to use, this is where prepare forms comes in really handy. And you can see that up here at the top and next to prepare forms, we have a bunch of different form field options. There are text fields, there are checkboxes, radio buttons, there are even drop-down lists that you can use. I try to stay away from those. Buttons, which can be really helpful, images, calendars, and signatures. So we're going to talk mostly just about these buttons because they are so important. So I want to add a radio button for this question here that we have for type of employment. Now, what we want to do is you just click this, and I click this button. I think I clicked it. And you just drag it down, and you can put it here, or you could put it to the left of full-time. I'll just drop it. Well, I didn't want to do that. All right. So for some reason, it does not want to let me do that. Let's see if I can drag a checkbox down. Oh, doesn't want to let me do that either. Oh, here we go. There's our checkbox. So sometimes it's problematic, but it's going to let me do it now. And that put in a checkbox. I'm gonna just abandon that for a minute, and we're going to do the radio button, because that's the first one and it's the more complicated of the two. So you drop in your radio button and you get this panel of choices. These are very complicated choices. They don't always make sense. So the way that you do this is someone can only choose one answer here. So the radio button choice is not choice 1, it is full-time. Okay. The group name is going to be, please indicate your type of employment. Okay, then we can look at we can add another button, so we can do part-time, and it's going to leave the group name, which is great, and we can put part-time here. And we can look at all the properties, and this is really important. So I'm going to drag this box down if it will let me. So the option, so you can see here, we have a name, but we don't have a tooltip. For our radio buttons, the name should list all of the options, okay? So the name for this radio button needs to be full-time, part-time, contract. And the tooltip needs to be the question. So it is, please indicate your type of employment. This is where the instructions are really helpful because you'll need to refer to these repeatedly. Then you need to go to options, and it tells you you're using a circle and the radio button choice is part-time. That's important, and that means we've got the right button. So we can go ahead and close that. I will not make you sit through, clearly though, this is, you could see when I hover over it, it says full-time, part-time contract. The reason we have to do this is so that if someone is using a screen reader, they will hear the question and the answers. So they'll know that they can only choose one option, that the question is, please indicate your type of employment, and that the choices are full-time, part-time, and contract. If we don't do all this work, what someone is going to hear is full-time, part-time, contract. They won't really know what the question is. And for this question, maybe that's obvious. For questions that have yes and no answers, it's much less obvious. For things like our checkboxes down here, if you don't know what the question is, it's really hard to know what red, green, blue, yellow, and purple represent. So those are the steps for radio buttons. For checkboxes, it's a similar process where the button is, we just click on properties. The name is the answer, which is red, and the tooltip is the question. So please choose your favorite colors. You have to make a judgment call here at times because you may have a very long question. You don't want your tooltip to be a paragraph long. So you might need to make it fairly succinct. It's really not necessary to include the please check all that apply. Users know that if it's a checkbox, particularly users of assistive technology are familiar with this, and they know that the checkbox means they can choose all that apply. So that's a little bit of sort of the tedious process, but what Pauline and I had talked about was how nice these buttons are because they're nice and big. And we really like the way that Adobe does that. So we spent a lot of time picking on Adobe, but I think it's important to give them credit because that's a really nice feature. I'm not going to go through all of the checkboxes because it will be sort of tedious. And I do have a completed form that we can look at to see the finished product. You're going to want to make, and I won't go through all of these because it will be tedious, these links. Typically what I do is go to prepare forms, which is another tool, and make these links so that they show up and they're clickable. If you wanted someone to submit this form via email to accessibility@mit.edu, you might think about making this link a button, a submit button. So someone could complete the form and then hit submit and it would automatically get emailed to that address. I think that's worth thinking about. Pauline, do you have anything else to say about sort of these different field types and checkboxes and radio buttons before we move on to?
I don't, but to create a submittable link, it's in, I'm spacing now. I'm sorry, I'm spacing out. I can't think of where you find that button, but it is part of the prepare forms.
Yeah, it's right up
here. Make that link submittable.
Yeah, it's right here. It says okay. And this is, you can even add a print button if you wanted to. It's a pretty nice, it's a nice feature, I think, for making this easy to use. Okay, so now we talked about structure and order, and that is very important with PDFs, and very, very confusing. So, and just imagine we're doing all of this work. We haven't even gotten to the accessibility checking of it. We're just preparing the form. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that there are companies that will do PDF conversion and remediation for you. If you have a lot of forms or you have very complicated forms, it is probably worth sending them out to do. Doing a few simple forms in-house, you know, if you get good at it, is probably worthwhile. So we want to talk about the tab order, and that's the order that the user will move through the form in. And you want to make sure that it's logical. You know, I can see this form, so I might move through tab, you know, name, department, email, MIT ID, job title, work phone, etc. And I can test that out. I can go here and I can hit tab. Oh, I'm editing. I don't want to do that. I sometimes will save the form, close it, and open the form and see what the tab order is. You can also check it over here. There are different ways that you can check this order. And let's see, we can show this, and we can show tab by structure. And this is showing our tab order over here on the right. Okay, so it's, I apologize, it's so small. Let me see if I can move this up. But you can see that the order that we're going in is MIT, name, department, email, MIT ID, job title. But then it gets kind of interesting because we go from please provide a detailed description of your request to course name and row number. And that isn't the order that I'm seeing on the field. What I see coming after provide a detailed description of your request is type of employment. And that is coming just before the signature field. And the reason is because we added those later. So you're going to want to reorder those. And you can do that a couple of different ways. You can drag and drop these, I believe. You can drag and drop them here. It's not letting me do it here. You can also, we're going to look at another way to do it where you can reorder things using the reading order tool. So that is not working for us today, but this is something that's really important because if you are adding and manipulating fields as you're working on the form, they're going to get out of order and you're going to have to go back and reorder them so that things flow logically. All right, so if we have things the way we want them, what I do then is go to, now I'm going to go to my accessibility tools. I'm going to move into our accessibility tools, and you can see that in this panel, there are a lot of options. Auto tag the document, auto tag form fields, reading options, accessibility checks, reports, identify form fields, set alternate text, setup assistant, and reading order. We're going to use quite a few of these. So the first thing I do is say auto tag the document. And it says it's already tagged and I want it to retag it. So I say yes. And you can see it opened up on the left, this accessibility panel, and it's telling me that there are some issues and we're going to have to fix those. So we're going to ignore that for now. But that is setting up the auto tags. And you can also auto tag the form fields. Sometimes I do that first and then I auto tag the document. Right now, auto tag form fields is disabled and that should be fine. And then we can go over here and on the left, we're now in our, we've moved out of preparing forms and now we're in the accessibility tools. And on the left, we have several different options. And one of them has a little tag on it and I can open up the tags pane. And tags in PDF are like the tags in HTML. They're what gives the document structure programmatically and allows the document to be machine read. Some of these tags though don't match up exactly with what we saw in what we see in HTML. There are figures and paths and things that we don't understand. There are headings, which is something that we do know something about. You can see that it's picked up a tag for a table. And here it's picking up our form fields. Okay, so it's listing MIT ID, email, name, department. Over here, you can move things around if they are not in order. And it looks like things are pretty good over here. Although one thing I'm noticing is that this is a heading test form for PDF conversion. And you can see when I highlight it on the left, it highlights it in my document, which is nice. But you can see it's listed as an H4. And the next heading on the page down here is listed as an H5. Return this form to Disability and Access Services. That's probably going to be a flag because we like to see headings that go in the correct order and start with 1. So there's a way that we can fix that. So we're gonna come back to the tags pane in a minute. The next one you want to look at is reading order. And this is a really nice tool. It's very confusing, I think, at first, but there are 2 different ways that you can look at your reading order. You can look at content or you can look at structure types, okay? So by content, they're talking about the order that they go in. So you can see that on the page, everything has a number next to it. If we go up to our top page, we start with 1, which is the DSL logo. We go to 2, which is this, the title of our document, test form, and so forth and so on. Looks like it's pretty much going in order here. And and it starts again numbering on the next page. That's nice. If you want it to show the order by structure types, you go here and it tells you what has a P tag, and that is similar to HTML where it's a paragraph tag. For this one, this is where we can rename this. So this is an H4 and we want to make it a heading 1. So we're going to just change that. And there we go. It's an H1. And we'll go down to our next heading, which was Return to Disability and Access Services. And we want to make that a heading 2. And we're going to change that. So this is a nice tool, I think, to use. And there are some steps in the reading order where you want to, you know, if you found some tagging issues like we just found with the H1 and the H2, you can correct those easily here. So once you've done this, and you could really spend all day looking at these tags and getting them exactly correct, which I think I did do yesterday working on this. But what you do when you've finished with that is you run your accessibility checker. Okay, so we want to say, let's check the accessibility and see where we are. And it's going to start checking, and it says, we need to check the logical reading order, we need to check the color contrast, and we failed for a title. And that's a pretty easy fix. You just right click and you can fix this, and we'll say test PDF form. So that's fixed. It looks like we have some problems with our tagging. These two elements are not tagged. So it wants us to put a tag on that, and that's where you can go back to your reading order and you can say, oh, well, these aren't tagged. I need to add a tag here. So I can do this. I can just draw a box around it, and I can pick a tag from here. I'm just going to call it text. And then that should take care of that issue. If I run the accessibility check again, let's see. Looks like we're still having issues. No. In any case, that should have taken care of that issue. Looks like we have a description that's not working here on our radio buttons. And you can find information by right-clicking. Adobe will explain the rule to you. I don't find this explanation as helpful as the WebAIM tools. When you go to the WebAIM information, if you have a question, they will explain exactly what's going on. So now what I want to do now is actually look at a completed form. This is the form that I finished working on. And you can see that this, you know, has the nice blue fields. It has the nice radio buttons. It has the nice check boxes completed. It has the form fields in my table. I have a nice signature field and a date field. And when I run my accessibility checker on this, I'm going to start checking. It found two issues. One is the logical reading order, which I already checked by tabbing through it. So I'm going to right click on that and say pass, because that's a manual check. I don't have any color contrast issues, so I'm going to say pass on that. And we don't have any issues with this form, okay, according to the accessibility checker. Now I happen to know, because I've gone through this form a lot, that there still are a couple little issues with this form that I could fix. But it did take, you know, several hours worth of work to get this working correctly. But if you follow the instructions that are on our site and that are on the WebAIM site, you can do this. So I'd like to stop there and just see if anybody has questions.
I have one question. Pauline mentioned not using, I think, the return key for when you're trying to create space in a form.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar how else you do that.
When you're in Word, you go to the paragraph up at the top, there's something that's paragraph. You open up that and a window opens, and then you'll have the options. I'm going to do it on at the top, you have paragraph. You click on that, it'll open up, and you'll have the opportunity to have tabs at the very bottom. And you click on that, and once you have that open, you can set a tab mark and then fill that from where you have the tab mark filled over with with a line, and it's straight, and you can make it as long or short as you want. Oh wait, that's tabbing. Sorry. Yeah, under paragraph, you have one of the other options is spacing, space after and space before, single space, multiple spacing. Pick single space, and then after, I always hit, for a regular text, I hit 6 point. And then if you want to create a bigger space, it's between 18 and 24 space. But it's right in paragraph.
Do you want me to share my screen and show that, Pauline?
Yeah, that would be good. I can't get that to work because I don't have my screen reader on, because it's really annoying when I'm in a Zoom.
So this is the Word document. It's up here under styles, and I believe you can adjust normal. There are different options. Normal text, that's assigning it.
And also highlight something and right click and paragraph comes up.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
In Mac, on a PC, it's different. On a PC,
I thought that was universal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, here's paragraph. If you right click, and it gives you these options.
PCs,
Okay.
yeah, it's the home screen on a PC, and it's you see you have the, yeah, I'm not on a PC, of course, at the moment. I'm on so it's different, and I can't figure it out, but it's there.
Yeah, so I just pulled it up, and you can see that you want indents and spacing and line breaks. So here you'd want the spacing after to be more.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing that I did not show that I probably should have was, let's see, I'm going to stop sharing this. In Adobe Acrobat, one of the ways that you can check your form is to use the Read Aloud feature. Let's see, I need to share my screen. And that's just under View, Read Out Loud, and you can say, read this page.
Supervisor form. Please provide a detailed description of your request. Please indicate your type of employment. Full-time. Please indicate your time of employment. Part-time. Unchecked part-time. Please indicate your time of employment. Unchecked contract. Please indicate your time of employment.
So that was just a way for you to sort of see what, I'm sorry, the volume was low. But you can see what Read Aloud is reading, and it read all of these, and it read nicely these radio buttons. You know, indicate your type of employment, full-time, part-time, and contract. So that someone hearing that read to them would understand what they needed to check off. Okay, so we are just about at an hour. That was a pretty full hour. If you have questions, please do send them to us at accessibility@mit.edu. And I can always consult with Pauline because she knows an awful lot about PDF forms and how to get them to work properly. How many forms have you done at this point, Pauline?
Well, I did a bunch of them before COVID, and I've learned so much that I feel like I have to go back and add a lot of stuff. learn, like creating, instead of line, you create that whole, you pull the handles down and make it one box, and creating the question with a radial button instead of just calling it the same thing. Sorry, my internet is very bad today. It's low tide here in the marina and the router is up on the dock. So I live on a boat. So yeah, I've learned a lot, and I feel like I probably 100 or more. And I feel like I need to constantly go back. Like anything you get good at and you're like, but my first ones were so bad.
Great. So, so Pauline is a great resource if you have questions. But thank you all for coming today. And thank you, Pauline. We appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Pauline.
Thank you.
And you're going to make this recording accessible